Hey everybody, welcome back to my Awakening Podcast, episode 9 today. Looking for God in all the wrong places, looking for God in too many faces, searching their eyes and looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of. Yeah, that must have been fun for you to hear. My apologies, folks, but anyhow, please like, subscribe, favorite, follow, and especially share this podcast because it may be that one thing, that one simple thing that changes someone's life. So this podcast I'm going to be talking about is going to bring you into my world of searching for God. I'm willing to bet it's going to be very similar to your experiences, but if not, it may just shed a little bit of light on how you could finally find God too. I've stated this before in other podcasts, but I grew up in a Roman Catholic church. Not only going, but at one point, I was an altar boy for a couple of years. All that really meant was I could see how empty-looking the attendees' faces when the priest gave his sermon. I attended catechism, I was baptized, I went through all the rituals, and I attended all the usual holiday events. But even doing all that, I felt that there was something abstractly missing from church. I recall that the only time I felt God's presence while being a Catholic was when I either heard the choir or when I was in the choir singing songs. It was as if I was just filling a seat rather than getting anything from any of the sermons. At one point, my mom decided to take us to another church in town, which was actually given at the state hospital, which fortunately had a majority of the attendees had some sort of mental disorder. So I guess I felt right at home. Now, the priest that spoke actually talked about God. He spoke in ways that I could more clearly relate to some extent. I mean, it was still the same service, but he actually had a lot of focus on the God part. Now, over the course of my early childhood, I had been to many other Catholic services only to find the same dull and repetitive godless information being presented. It just was a different face presenting it. I gathered that it was more like the franchise way of doing things, you know? If everyone says the same thing, the attendees get it brainwashed in. It's kind of like knowing that when you visit McDonald's, the fries will always taste the same. Then when I turned 18, I was blessed to have joined the military, and there I could actually test drive lots of different religions, like Presbyterian, Agnostic, Judaism, Southern Baptist, Christian, Lutheran, Protestant. I mean, there were a bunch of others that I went to that were kind of a little on the cultish side more than religions, but through all of those, not one of them brought me to what I was deeply looking for. Even though I really didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but when you visit so many, the search becomes relatively obvious. So throughout my life, the closest thing I found to connecting to God were my Native American beliefs and practices. It seemed to be the only thing I found that actually focused on the Creator above all else. Yes, they honored the moon, the sun, the earth mother, animals, mountains, rocks, the sky, the wind, water, and so on, but they always came back to fully honoring and worshiping the Creator. So there I went. For more than 30 years, I began to practice and learn all about my heritage, of which I still haven't dug deep enough into to see if I have legitimate bloodlines to any tribe or anything like that, because to me it has nothing to do with a label. It has to do with what I feel. I would end up seeking out tribes and connections with tribal members and some of the elders to learn and follow from them. I found friends in the Sioux Nation, as well as Abenaki and Ojibwe and Mohican, Seneca, Lumbee, and Apache. I learned everything I could from them and found that everything seemed to overlap and flow in such similar paths. And that was where I staked my claim to a culture rather than a religion. I spent time in North and South Dakota with Lakota at Standing Rock doing spiritual work and finding my new name as my brother from the res called me Matokaska when he first met me. Now, that loosely translates to white bear. I almost took it as a slight insult as I'm legally considered white and my name is Bear, but he then said it was because I grew up in the snow country of Vermont, which of course means polar bear, white bear. And later on during my spiritual work with him and on my own, I was communing a lot with the red-tailed hawks. I would call them in to not only me, but to both of us. And I would talk to them and they seemed to respond to me. And one night, he decided to change my name. He said, Casa Ela Mato, which loosely translates to soaring bear. So my search for God was completed, at least as far as I knew. Then my journey to Sedona began over a decade ago, and my path was to be a very tenuous one indeed. A lot goes into that. You can hear about that through other podcast episodes that I've done. Anyway, it was through my third major dark night of the soul that I began this new walk. In short, I had to let go of my children, my family, my friends, my job, my home, my everything. I had to let go of everything because I had gone down a path that was darker than I could have ever imagined. At the time, and doing what I thought was right, I made some destructive decisions that put everyone I knew in harm's way. I had been presented with choices, and all but one of those choices was going to end up in someone getting seriously hurt or possibly even killed. I wasn't prepared for that, as I don't think anybody would be. So I had to make the only choice that made sense to me at the time, and that was I had to leave for everybody's safety. In doing so, I took steps to ensure everyone I knew and loved was going to remain safe. That's another dark part, but that's also going to be for another time. So where does God come in? Well, upon my arrival in Sedona, which, by the way, was actually decided by a flip of a coin, I was in a little town called Bellingham, Washington, which, if you look on the map, it's like the northwesternmost point closest to the border of Vancouver. It's right on the edge of the United States and Canada's border. I was there, and through some decisions I had to make, I decided I had to find a new destination. I decided at the time I was either going to go to Alaska, heads, or Sedona, tails. Tails came up, and south I went. At this point in my life, I thought that I must have already experienced everything I possibly could, and that if I can't find peace in Sedona, there was going to be no reason to continue this human walk. So in my head, it was my final destination. Through hiking and deep meditation, I managed to connect to God indirectly through the ancestral spirits, the Native American culture that was here, the ancient sites that I got to visit. I've been able to reconnect with my mom, who had passed away some years before, and the Red Rocks became like my spiritual center. It was my new religion, my place of happiness. I finally felt at peace in these rocks. I'd camp out on the summits and live off the land at times. I bought my first Native American style flute, and I learned to play by feel, and it began to feel right, like I had found my home and my purpose. I became a hiking guide and shared all the history and the insanity that Sedona has to offer. And then I started finding my place in guiding people with a medicine wheel, which a medicine wheel is simply a nice tool that American Indians used to use in ceremonies hundreds of years ago. Everything at that time seemed to be fitting in place. I felt happy again. Then, a little over 5 years ago, I met this woman. She was this little spitfire of a lady that had her own business and was very tight with her family and her close friends. We started hanging out together and just talking about everything. I mean, like from my journey to Sedona, her journey to Sedona, how we got here, what our childhood was like, our adulthood was like, all the dark nights of the soul and everything. It quickly became the most unique relationship I have ever had with a human. She provided me with a safe place to share my truth. And more importantly, she provided me with trust, which from my past, you can see how important that is to me. I began to work with her at her tour business as a guide, and things kind of grew between us. One day she said she was going to go to her spiritual center, of which we had long conversations about prior to this, but she still wanted to kind of point it out to me that she was heading there. She knew my spirituality resided in my American Indian culture, but she also knew I was still in search of God, because I wouldn't use the word God. I'd use the word Creator instead. I refused to type G-O-D into anything. So being the clever little lady she was, she asked me to go. Knowing what I knew at the time, I told her I was going to pass. She then proceeded to use her sneaky little way of reeling me in like a fish. She said that she was going to ask her other guy friend to go. So I immediately said, no, it's fine, I'll go. Hook, line, and sinker, I went. When we arrived at this building, it was a kind of a unique structure. It was very Vermont-esque in its shape and construction. It appeared to me like nothing like anything I'd seen before in a religious structure, so I was pretty intrigued with it. And inside, when this man came out to talk, he said he was the spiritual leader, and he had long dark hair and was wearing very light and fluffy clothing, but it was such a breath of fresh air kind of look. You know, I wasn't expecting this kind of look to be trying to talk to me about whatever it was that was coming. He spoke about this thing called the Christ consciousness, and I thought I was going to hear some sort of evangelistic talk, but then he started throwing in American Indian culture and a little bit of Buddhism and some Christianity and some things from the Bible, the Quran, and a slew of other things that were just cool. And it just started integrating this connection to God. The entire service was about God, connecting directly to God, not through some like dogmatic structure or the sit, stand, kneel thing. You know, it was simple. Go to God. Remove the middleman from being the focal point. Just simply go to God. Using phrases like go vertical, keep centered. It's not for the taking, it's for giving. Be the Christ, be the love, be the example of God. It was as if all my struggles and hardships in my life up to this point finally came to an end. I found the way back to God. I found that everything was really and truly within me. All my healing, my happiness, my joy, my peace, love. It's all within me. And I'll never be without. Simply put, find the God in you. Forgive yourself and others. Be the light. Share the light. Always do the right thing. So looking for God, I found the right place. In me. It's like this. God is, I am, we are. And so it is. Amen and aho. Thank you, folks, for listening in again. I appreciate your time and your energy and your desire just to listen. Whether you're getting something out of this or you're thinking I'm a nut job, it's okay. I'm okay with that. I appreciate your time and effort. I appreciate the fact that you've actually spent time doing this. And maybe somewhere in there you are looking for God. And maybe I'm helping. God bless you all, and I hope to hear from you on my next podcast.